through.
Sir, can we start the class?
Yes, yeah, just give me a minute.
Okay, sir. Please mute.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch, a good break. We've got our final session this afternoon, where we need to go into one or two more models and looking at implementation and so on. And that will really help to wind everything up. Now, there was a question that came in about reading, recommended reading. Quite frankly, there is more than enough in the manual for you to be able to do all you need in terms of substantial reading. And then all you need to do is to take some keywords and do a keyword search on Google Scholar. And then you can get some journal articles to be able to support it. Now, let's assume that you've got plenty of time on your hands and that you love reading. Here is the first book that you could have a look at. It's a book called The Strategy Process, but you can see how thick it is. It's like 2.5 inches thick. And this is put together by Henry Mintzberg, and James Quinn, his colleague. And this is a classic. This is one of the classical books on strategy. And it's a copy that I have in my library. I've had it, for a good number of years. It's a good read. It's heavy. You need a lot of patience to go through it, but there's some good stuff. Now, if you want, this is the American approach. if you want the British approach, then you go for a book called Strategic Management by Johnson and Scholes. Johnson and Scholes is the UK version, and it's similar size, but it's packed full of case studies and not a lot of substantial content. It's all interesting read, but the problem is that those case studies now are quite aged, and I don't personally like going into historical case studies where the lessons learned were great at that time, but they don't apply today. That's why with DHL, I wanted to bring everything up to you, right up to date, right up to this quarter, so that we are living a live case study, not a historical case study, which people can bring out of the cupboard and prepared, well conceived answers. So those are the two. Now, because this subject is very heavily on strategy and not about change, we don't have a lot of time to deal with change. But if you're interested in change management, this is the best book, that there is on change, in my view. And this is a book by Bernard Burns called Managing Change. You can find it. It's very easy to read. It's written for you guys. He's a lecturer at Manchester University, and I like the way that he writes. So reading Mintzberg and Quinn, Strategy Process, Johnson and Scholes, and Bernard Burns, those three are more than enough. But I think most of you are not even going to have enough time to finish the manual. I think that's the reality of it. We have to be practical about it, because this is an executive program. It's not a full-time MBA program where reading is number one. I think application is number one when it comes to this program. And it's the way that it was designed. It wasn't designed to be heavily academic. So thank you for the question. I'm going to continue, and then we'll take a break to take your questions, before we finish, to make sure that anything that you want to ask we can deal with. I apologize that we can't make this very interactive because we're a huge group. But if there are any questions, please send them to the chat box, or even email them through to the college, to Ratna, the administrator. She can forward them on to me, and I will answer them and get them back to you. If there's anything that you are worried about the subject. And of course, you'll have Dr. Logo, who's really excellent as your local tutor. You're very lucky, because she's very, very thorough, very good, very clear. And I think you're in very, very good hands to get you out the other end safely. All right, so let's continue our journey with part 3, and we're now moving to section 11 of the manual, where I just want to introduce some cliched ideas so that you are aware of what it's all about. And the first thing I'd like to talk about, is blue ocean and the blue ocean strategy. Now, this was a theory that has been put together many, many, many years ago, and then it was dusted down and readdressed and renamed by a couple of people at INSEAD, and they've put together a book which they've been lucky with, based on this concept of blue ocean. Now, what's it all about? In very simple terms, the ocean is a metaphor for the competitive marketplace. That's really what it is. And the question you've really got to ask yourself, is what color is the ocean? So if we go to Maxis and we look at the telecommunications industry and the market for telecommunications and connectivity in Malaysia, that ocean is red. You've got a lot of competition going on amongst 2 or 3 key players and others that may enter the market. So it means that it's a red ocean. It's got lots of sharks in there that are fighting over the same market share, and that's life. And even if you have a look at, let's say, the education industry, when we were in Hong Kong, running an MBA program at that time in strategic marketing. I think we were the only one there that was doing a specialist MBA program. There were maybe 20 or 25 other MBA providers. But when we pulled out of Hong Kong, because we found that the potential had really shrunk quite a lot, there were 147 different programs. So the ocean, the competitive marketplace, was really scarlet red. And a lot of competition based on price. The same thing happened in Singapore, which is why I took the strategic move as a company to put all our MBA programs in-house, to go into the corporate market, which really does test you because you have to apply all of this into projects in the organization for corporate payoff. And that's what we did with corporate programs and continue to do so. We've got another one starting. As soon as the MC is over, we've got another corporate program starting for another company. And, that's the market that I've had to move into, while others, like Westminster College and stuff, they remain in the open market, in the red ocean. Now, let me just share with you why I decided to get out of the red ocean. Is because at the end of the day, price becomes the first variable of choice. So I found, when we were in Singapore running our strategic marketing program, we launched at 28,888 Singapore dollars back in 1986. And we ran the program there for about 20 years. And our competitors came in and undercut 25, 23, got all the way down to 12,000 Singapore dollars. So it killed our market. Who's going to pay twice the price because they don't understand if it's going to be twice the value? And many people coming in just want an MBA anyway. They're not there to learn so much. They just want it to have on their business card as an essential criteria for careers and so on. So the market profile and the customer profile changes. And the same thing happens in markets. Once you start competing on price, then it all changes. So what you've got to think about with this concept, with your assignment, you are protecting your core business, right? You're trying to protect it for the longer term, secure its future. One question you might ask is, what color is the ocean? Is it amber? Is it light blue? Is it dark blue? Is it scarlet red? Because that is going to have an implication upon your strategies for market penetration and so on. So this is where the idea is useful. Guys, this is just a concept. You can't really do very much more with it, although I'll explain to you how it works. So this is what Rene and Morgwan idea about Blue Ocean was all about. But they've done very well. They've set up their own consultancy companies. Some companies are using Blue Ocean strategy here in Malaysia. Perhaps I'll share with you because I know you like these examples. CIMB put in a Blue Ocean strategy process through the bank. And the way that they did it was quite creative. They said to their staff, we need to innovate. And we want you to think about how you can create blue oceans inside the business. And they set it up as a competition. And that competition ran for a couple of years. And very big prizes were given to people that won the competition because CIMB then implemented these new ideas. Now, I thought that was very clever. Not because of Blue Ocean, but because it got the organization energized into thinking about change, innovation, how we can improve what we do on the job. So it was very clever. And some of the public sector organizations, some of the ministries were looking at Blue Ocean strategy. I was asked to help to put one into the civil service, which I didn't want to do, because I said to these guys, look, you are more intelligent probably than the authors. You can do it yourself. There's nothing to it. And indeed, maybe you can find on the internet the copies of the Blue Ocean strategy that CIMB use. I've got copies here with me, but I can't share them with you because we're not together. But they treated the whole thing like a cartoon. They made it into a game. And it's based on one simple formula. And I think this is the thing that I want to share with you. The blue ocean strategy about the concept of the competitive nature of the market is the first step. The second step, which I think is much more useful, is called value innovation. So this is the magic of blue ocean, and this is what CIMB were using. So the formula that was proposed by the authors was something based on value innovation. Now, at that time, which is about 15 years ago, the whole idea of value creation, value delivery, value-based approach to strategy, a lot of books came out, a lot of journal articles came out, a lot of interesting stuff, and it's good, and I still think it's valuable today. But what these guys said, if you want to create a blue ocean, you have to make your competitors irrelevant. Now, this is a big goal. I mean, how to do that? You see, what I did when I launched the first MBA in strategic marketing in the world, there is my blue ocean. Nobody else has one. And I got the backing of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, the backing of the University of Hull, and we launched in Singapore. The first evening when I did the launch, we had a conference room full of over 800 people. And we think we received like 200 applications. I screened them into groups of 25. And we got enough to start programs, one after another, for the first 6 months. Now, why? Because it's new. It creates a blue ocean. Nobody's done this before. And I think a lot of people didn't know what strategic marketing was about because it was a term I created. But that blue ocean soon became light blue, became orange, became amber, became red, became scarlet, you see? So the thing that you've got to think about with competition and new ideas, how long have you got in the market to get a market advantage? I created the first taught DBA program in the world, and we started that in Malaysia, we started it in Sri Lanka, we started it in London, very successful. But then competitors come in trying to emulate the same idea. So again, the blue ocean starts to become progressively more red. And the DBA program to run is very, very resource hungry. It's an incredibly expensive program to run in terms of cost. So whilst it's a good value-added contribution to the product portfolio, it's not something that's going to generate a lot of net free cash flow. It just creates prestige. So there is another aspect. Why do we need the blue ocean? So let's explain to you how value innovation works. Now, these guys said, okay, so how do we create the blue ocean? The first thing we need to do is to add value to the customer experience, or to add value to new customers who might need that experience. But at the same time, we want to reduce cost. So it's like an oxymoron. It's quite a sort of strange thing. On the one hand, we want to add value. On the other, we want to reduce cost. When an accountant looks at this, he thinks, it's stupid. How are we going to do that? Because adding value normally adds cost. So this was the idea. And that is why CIMB latched onto the ideas by saying to people in divisions and in departments, what can we do to work processes that will add value to our productivity, that will add value to our optimization, that will add value to our customers internally and externally, but at the same time, reduce cost. So just to share with you, working with FGV, for example, on strategy and things I've already mentioned, one thing that I was very keen to do was to increase productivity in the workplace, to change the culture. So what I did was to to recommend the delayering of internal processes. So instead of getting, maybe 5 or 6 sets of signatures off something which is not terribly important, reducing the signatures down to 2, delayering adds value to the process, increases productivity, speeds up the business, makes things more agile, and at the same time, it reduces cost of administration. But I didn't call that a blue ocean. It's just a way of thinking. Now, we can say, what are good examples of blue ocean? And I suppose one of the best examples in Malaysia is Tony Fernandez Air Asia, because he added value to the people that are flying by making new destinations within reach and at a very low ticket price. And he targeted initially the people that had never flown before. He makes flying accessible. But in so doing, in relation to competitive flights on Malaysian Airlines or even other airlines, his ticket price was much lower, so he reduced cost. So this is, a good example. And indeed, other budget airlines in other parts of the world have done it. I worked on a project for a low-cost carrier in UK flying out of Heathrow, doing long-haul budget air travel to Los Angeles and to New York. And I did the marketing campaigns, the launch campaigns behind. Now, why was that successful? Because I am reaching through to people that want to get to New York and Los Angeles with one purpose. They want to visit friends and relatives. And also because they'd never traveled before. They'd never done transatlantic travel. That was my target market. And I'm reducing costs because if they wanted to go on British Airways, the cost would be 4 to 5 times the price. So we created the blue ocean. But I think within 2 to 3 years, 2 things happened. The main carriers, the national carrier like British Airways, reduced price of their tickets. Other budget airlines came on board, like Ryanair, for example. And we find that we got more and more competition. So all I can do is then add more routes. But America was our target market, and the biggest markets were going into Los Angeles, and into New York. So where else do we go? I have to choose other cities. Now, do I go to Chicago? Is that the wise choice? Do I go to Atlanta? Because that's also a very important gateway. Or do I just forget about the US market for further market development and start to look at other locations? Maybe I need to join a red ocean of all the low-cost carriers going into Spain. You see? So what I want to share with you is this. You can start with a blue ocean strategy. But what's next? See, I learned this from my old boss when I was working in a consultancy company. We had about 75 staff, and I went into a middle management position and became number 2 in that organization. And then I went out to run my own and with a management buyout. But my boss always used to say to me, Lester, it's great and it's good, but what's next? And he was the type of individual that was highly driven, high energy, entrepreneurial, and never said thank you if you'd done a good job. It's always what next. We had a big consultancy project on with Ford's, and Ford's then offered me a job to work with them, which I had to turn down because of the loyalty to my organization. And that job was worth a lot of money. It was very good for the business. But he said, well, okay, what's next? And I found that very strange. And I always I thought, I believe in thanking people. If they've done a good job, thank them, recognize them, not say what's next. This was his way of manipulating you. I learned later on. But I've learned from that. You see, with blue ocean strategy, which doesn't work for very long, I would ask, what's next before we start? So what I've learned in marketing is what is the promotion after the promotion after the promotion. Because the life cycle of one promotion is going to last 2 to 3 months or less. So with a blue ocean strategy, we know it's going to become red. So if I go in for blue ocean, I've got to think about what's the next blue ocean and the next blue ocean. We did some work on acquisition strategy for A&W, the fast food operation. And I was involved in the buyout, which KUB were involved with, and so on and so forth. And I did the due diligence in Hong Kong, in Thailand, etc. That was the consultancy work that I did under that banner. But their view of the business, which wasn't doing very well, was that it all depends on promotion, promotion, promotion. And when I did an assessment in Thailand, just to share with you, in 1 year, there were 13 promotions. So one promotion didn't even last 4 weeks. And the amount of money that was spent on, product-based promotions, price-based promotions, banded promotions, band pack promotions, joint brand, co-brand promotions, you name it, they did it all, just to create in-store vibrancy. So from a marketing point of view, you're constantly thinking about the next promotion, the promotion after the promotion after the promotion, for a whole set. And it's the same thing here. How long will you get market advantage from a blue ocean strategy? That's the thing that I find, fascinating, because others will surely follow. So now you come back to protecting your core business. You're going to be putting in new ideas. Just have this at the back of the mind. How long will we get benefit from that new idea? How long will it last? Second thing, and I always recommend this to clients, let's not look at the strategy for the next 12 months. Let's think about the strategy for the next 3 years, because I need to see the strategy after the strategy after the strategy, so that we've got a good, cohesive, long-term strategy for sustainability. So that's, in simple terms, what Blue Ocean is about. The examples that I've given you, on page 183, are good examples of blue ocean. But is it sustainable? You see, in their book on blue ocean strategy, and the subsequent, and there's also a sequel to it, which isn't very interesting, but the original book was quite interesting, because they create this and they write about a case study in the book. And the case study is based on a Canadian arts performing organization called Cirque du Soleil, or Cirque du Soleil. It's a French term created in Canada, where it's a French-speaking area in where the business was originated. So basically, Cirque du Soleil is a flying circus. And what they did was take the concept of a circus and take away the animals, take away the clowns, take away the atmosphere, and reduce a lot of those costs. And what they do is to create ballet in the air. It's a performing arts company, basically, in a circus environment. So they add value because it's a beautiful experience if you're into ballet in the air, and you're into all of these acrobatics and gymnastics and so on. It's a wonderful experience. I have been. I only ever went once, and I wouldn't want to go again because I didn't enjoy it that much. But what they have done is to reduce their operating costs, because they just have traveling teams that go around. They create the circus environment and so on and so forth. Now, this is their business model. What the book talks about is how it's a good example of blue ocean strategy. And the reason that I think that I felt a little bit, unhappy about the blue ocean book is that they talk about Cirque du Soleil a lot in the book. But Cirque du Soleil was used as a case study to show how blue ocean strategy can work. It's not written about Cirque du Soleil because the authors applied their methodology to design and develop Cirque du Soleil as a new business based on blue ocean strategy. Now, had that happened, they said, hey guys, we've created this wonderful model and we've applied it here, read my book, I give it more credibility. So it's the same way. I've just given you an example of AirAsia, but AirAsia is AirAsia because Tony Fernandez has followed what Virgin and his good friend that runs Virgin Airlines has been doing. Richard Branson and him are buddies. And what he's done is simply to follow what Richard Branson has done. This is nothing to do with blue ocean strategy, but it's a good example of how this would work. Now, this is why CIMB said, yeah, I like the idea, but I don't like the idea of trying to apply it something after the event. I want to be able to be proactive about it. So let's see whether we can make it work in our organization, and can we make it stick? Now, I'm not sure whether today it's still working, but my gut feel would tell me no. I think it's a good thing to do for 2 or 3 years to get new ideas, but after that you face burnout. So you would choose what to do. I tend to feel that I don't know many organizations that have said, let's use blue ocean. I can tell you tons of organizations that are a blue ocean, but it didn't last for long. Some of the ladies listening, you probably know of Philip Wayne. Philip Wayne that runs all these wonderful slimming and wellness clinics around Singapore, in fact, and in Malaysia as well. And you go and you have your body wrapped in very cold towels to shrink your body to help you to lose weight, etc., etc. And then while you're there, they will upsell and cross-sell other products. Now that was a blue ocean because it's directly targeted at ladies, or was at that time. But how long did Philip Wayne last? How long was it before other competitors are coming in? And it's the same thing with laser surgery. Laser surgery on the eyes to remove cataracts, for example. That's become quite a red ocean. Even into anti-aging. How many clinics are there set up all over Malaysia that are doing skin peeling, Botox injections, fillers? That was also a blue ocean. I was in London about 3 years ago, and I met up with a guy that I knew from Switzerland, a doctor. And I said, hey, what are you doing here? Because I was actually shopping in Selfridges, and I bumped into him. And he said, I've come here to open a new business. And he said, it's actually doing quite well. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm doing facelifts because I am a surgeon. I said, yeah, I know. He said, I'm doing facelifts without surgery. So basically people come in, they get an assessment, and I'll put fillers or Botox or whatever it may well be to make people look 15, 20 years longer. And I'm packed out. I've only been running this business for 3 months. And I said, come, he said, it's only very, very nearby. So I said, okay, let's have a cup of coffee and have a chat. And then I'll come and have a look at your new business, which I did. So this was a one-man show, nicely positioned with Swiss flags and all sorts of Swiss identity because Swiss-based product. And he'd set up. And I said to him, I said, if I look at it from a strategy point of view, what you've done in London is to create a blue ocean. Nobody else is doing this yet. He said, yes, I know. I said to him, look, enjoy it while it lasts. He said, what do you mean? I said, look, I'm a strategist. This is what I do for a living. And you are a surgeon. That's what you do for a living. And now you've become an entrepreneur. And I can respect that. But from experience, take it while it's there, benefit while it's there, but recognize it won't last long. Because there'll be plenty of competition coming in very quickly We call this a blue ocean, but the blue ocean is going to become red very quickly because this clinic that you've opened is just around the corner from Harley Street, from Devonshire Place. All these places are full, of clinics, dentists, etc., high end. They will soon start to borrow your ideas. And he said, well, thank you for that. So I said, no, I mean it sincerely. I would give this 18 months and I won't see you here. And I come into London very, very frequently because there's a very good pharmacy directly opposite your clinic called Bell and Dragon. And I said, yes, I know. I said, I go in there a lot. Now, this was 3 years ago? And I used to go back to London pretty much every month, every 2 months before the MCO on a very regular basis. And I'd pop in and say hello to him, how it's going. I said, how are the queues? And we had a laugh about it. And he said to me, business is slowing down, but it's still good. I said, yeah, but just listen to me, 18 months. 18 months later, there is a notice outside the clinic. We have closed. You see? I have his contact number. He's gone back to Switzerland. He's gone back into mainstream surgery. And I called him out. So I said, so how? He said, yeah, you told me. But thank you for your advice because I did listen to you. And I know you wouldn't be telling me that just because you feel you want to scare me. But to share with you, in the first year, I made very, very good money out of this. And I've used that money very wisely now, and to invest in something which is less fashionable, but much more long-term sustainable in Switzerland. So let's stay in touch. So here I'm just sharing with you, examples. It's a great process to think about. So I've always shared this with people. If you're into blue ocean strategy, don't even think about it lasting long. So basically, this value innovation formula is about reducing cost or eliminating cost completely and creating or adding value to the customer to be able to get new market space. So I don't want to go on any more about that. There's stuff in the manual which you can read about it. And, good luck if you want to use it. Frankly, I don't give much credence to it, as you can probably see from my tone of voice and so on and so forth. Now, what I would like to fast forward to very, very quickly is on page 193, just to have a very quick look at the business model canvas at the bottom of that page. So if you can go through your manual a few more pages, and we have a look at the business model. Now, I don't want to spend much time on the business model per se, because it's a whole weekend. We can have a whole weekend's module on business model transformation. Indeed, I run these type of programs on business model transformation in different parts of the world, in Dubai and in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and so on. I run conferences on business modeling. And I even been supervising a doctoral thesis on business modeling for SMEs. The guy's just got his PhD about 4 months ago. So it's a big thing to me. I'm very interested in business modeling, but I just want to refer you to page 193, where you can see this business model canvas. Now, this is not my canvas. This is a canvas put together by a guy called Osterwalder, who did his PhD creating that canvas. And the one that I've supervised very recently is a different canvas based from SMEs. But why I'm introducing this to you is this. We are thinking about our core business. And we're thinking a way of protecting our core business. And we've discussed various approaches. Now, my question in my mind is purpose. Why are we having to protect our core business? All right. So if you go into the business model canvas, the first question you've got to ask yourself, where are we vulnerable? Are we vulnerable in our channels? Are we vulnerable in our customer relationships? Are we vulnerable in our value chain? Is our competitor or are our competitors killing our business? Or is it what we do operationally, which could be improved? So that's good. First cut. Second cut, you are going to be asked to improve or protect the business in some way. And I've given you lots of ideas. The other idea I wanted to share with you is if we go back to the business model and we want to protect our core business, inside that business model canvas, where are the priorities? Now, when I was running a MBA program in Switzerland, and we talked about similar types of things, and we had the marketing director from Schweppes on the program. And Schweppes, you know, this is a carbonated set of drinks and mixers that go with maybe gin or alcoholic beverages. So, or you can have them on their own. Things like mineral water, not mineral water, tonic water would be a good example. Slimline tonic water. Schweppes as a brand has been around probably for 120 years. And I asked him, if you want to protect Schweppes as a business, where's the priority? And he said to me, without any doubt, top of mind, he said, the most important priority to us as a business, and this is his words, I remember them to this day, and this is probably 15 years ago, route to the market. The route to the market is the most important thing in our business model. So our core business depends on lots of things, but where we could be vulnerable and where we spend a great deal of time is building up the relationship capital with our distributors and our resellers. So I said, okay, let's explore that. Because I come into Switzerland for 6 months in a year. I'm very fortunate to be running this program, and I'm here for 6 big sessions on strategy and 6 sessions on marketing. And I'd like to explore that a bit further. Can you explain what you mean about relationship? He said, yeah. As a company worldwide, Schweppes has a global marketing campaign, and it's the same campaign going all over the world. But in Switzerland and in Europe, the distributors have more power than they do in other parts of the world. The bargaining power is with the distributor, it's not with us, which is different. So we allow our distributors to localize our Schweppes campaign. And he said, on my iPad, I can give you an example. And he shared that with the class. He said, this is our global campaign. But people in Switzerland here and in Germany, they don't like it because it doesn't translate very well into the culture. In fact, it could be seen as potentially arrogant or even offensive. So they have come up with their own campaign. Okay. Now, at board level, the policy is standardization of all promotional activities globally. See the power of our distributors in Europe? We have allowed the distributors to localize the campaign. And the campaign was running at that time in Zurich Airport with posters in the local German language. And in some countries in English, it's been converted to Spanish and so on and so forth. Now, he said to me, this is why our business model is vulnerable to our channel, and we have to make sure that we look upon the protection of our core business by preserving very close working relationships with our distributors. Some are very big distributors. They're multinational distributors almost, and others are local. But That is how we must operate. He said the rest can all fall into place. Because the customers, we don't have a direct relationship with our end users. There's no relationship between the people that drink mineral water or drink carbonated water, that are drinking lime juice or whatever it may well be that we're producing, because the only relationship we have with the final end consumer is through the brand. The relationship that we have must be with our reseller markets. So if we had to do one thing only to protect our core business, it's working with our channels in preferred partnerships for survival, growth, and long-term shareholder value for both parties. So I'm just sharing that with you as a bit of magic, because when you come back to answering this question about protecting your core business, and we go back to the business model as a source of reference, you can't go throughout the entire business model because it's going to be too expensive and take simply too long. Now, that surprised me, quite frankly, but it seemed obvious, of course, when I explained it. But everyone was simply sort of impressed, blown away. You know, what a good example, because many of the people in the class are engineers. They're working for the railways, you know, they're working for the airlines, or they're working for big electronic companies like Siemens and so on. You know, they're all into heavy engineering things, but they found that really quite interesting. So my question to you is, in looking at this task about protecting our core business, should we go back to the business model to look at what interventions or transformation or change that you think would be appropriate? So I'm just flagging that up because I think it's important that we, you know, get that sort of understanding. Good. Okay. What I'd like to do now is to just give you the opportunity, you know, to reflect and think about what we've done so far over the time since Friday. And are there any questions that you would like to ask? I don't want to leave this right until the end of the day, because you'll all be more happy and want you to get back to your families and so on. And I understand that. So is there anything in your mind that you would like to get some insight, or for me to address some of your questions? Anything at all? Or as we can say, you know, in the marriage ceremony, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Dr. Lester, I just like to ask that, I think in say example, in one of the tasks that I think you have actually mentioned that pastel also you can use it, and soft also you can use it, So in answering the questions, do you recommend us to use both? Because I think I think the words is also, the word counts also is quite a lot, So I think we just use one of the model and try to elaborate from it.
This is the conversation you must have with Dr. Loga, because she's going to meet up this weekend, and she's going to be there to guide you on this micro detail. Is there anything else at all? Okay, well then we just carry on for a little bit longer. We take a short break. Now, let me proceed, because I want to go down into section 12 of the manual on page 199. Now, were we to use any form of intervention, be it into the business model, being it into market penetration, business development, whatever it may well be, and we go back into a corporate situation, there has to be a very good reason. And the way that I was trained, and I think the way that you've probably been trained and influenced as well, is this: Okay, good idea, great idea, like it. Where is the business case? Now, what does that mean? How much is it going to cost us? Over what period of time? What resource drain is there going to be in the organization? And what is the return on our investment? I was having to have a conversation with some friends, over lunchtime. We had a lunchtime break, and we were talking about children. And my son is in the UK at the moment, having finished his first degree at Durham University and then his master's degree in UCL, and he's now going to go out into the employment world, And then we were talking about similar situations, and then the person I was speaking to said, "Well, how much does it cost, to get him to where he is today?" And I said, "Well, he's been in private education since he was 18 months, and he's now 23, 24. I've never actually sat down and worked out how much it's cost." And the person I was talking to, said, "Well, if you work it out on average of X per year times Y years, we're talking about millions in terms of ringgits." I said, "Probably true." And then the question came, so where is the return on investment? I said, I had that same conversation with the guy that I write all my books with, Professor Jeff Lancaster, many years ago, because he was telling me the same story. He's invested so much in his children's education. And where is the return on investment? And we both came to understand and to come to this point that the return on investment is incremental. It's during those 20 years. It's not at the end of that process, because you have the joy in seeing your children grow up. You have the joy in seeing them becoming more competent to be able to communicate more easily, and it's the joy that they bring and the soul they bring to the family. There's the ROI. And I've never had to think about that, and I would never go any further. But now we bring this back into a business situation. We want to now protect our core business. Now, is it going to be through innovation? Is it going to be through improved customer relationships? What is it that we're going to do to be able to get more business in? Now, where is the business case? How much is this going to cost us? Over what period of time? And when are we going to start seeing some benefit from it? Now, the project that I'm working on at the moment, transformation project I'm working on at the moment, I'm talking about a budget of almost 40 million US dollars locally here on digital transformation. And the one that we're doing for Japanese is around about 200 US. It's a huge project. Now, I have to prepare and help them prepare the business case. And I've done that by looking at the ROI, by sector, by stakeholder group, and so on and so forth. So I know that I'm going to get something around about 40% return on that investment with quite accurate figures that have been done. So I'm quite happy, and hopefully the board will sign everything off next week, and away we go. Now, I'm asking you, in terms of your assignment, if you are putting in interventions, if we want to improve our levels of market penetration, if we want to put in new product development, how much is that going to cost? And when are we going to see a likely return? Which is why I think that market development is easier and better than going into product development, because product development is involving time, research and development, a whole host of process. It's slower to be able to get the return from, but we might need both. Now, looking at today's scenario and looking at sustainability in the future, survival, growth, companies are now having to change their business model. Companies are having to reinvest, divest. What is the business case? When are we going to see that return? So this is what I want to share with you in terms of the thinking, that the assignment is very straightforward. It flows through, and you can do it at a superficial level, but what I'm wanting to encourage you to think about is to think about this at a managerial level, at a strategic level, because I don't want to start putting in changes into this organization, which could face a lot of resistance if there are no pain points there, and if the pain points are not really actionable, then what is the point? So we have to have a rationale in our mind when we're selling our ideas of intervention to the board or to the decision-making unit. So what I've written here on page 12, on section 12, on page 199, is to give you typical criteria that can be used to justify your change. Now, when you put in your change, whether using Ansoff, using Mintzberg, whatever, I think it's all excellent stuff. Guys, you need to justify it. As a consultant, you can't come along with a bright idea producing the Ansoff matrix to produce a solution, because your client will want to know why and how, and is this the best that we can do? Okay, so we have to justify what we're doing. How is that justification going to work? Through criteria for evaluation. So on page 199, I've given you typical examples. So if you just look at the topics on that page, at a most basic level, we could say, well, we need to do this because of our SWOT analysis findings. The findings of the SWOT analysis reduce the strategic thrust for the future, and based on that analysis, this gives us the conviction to move ahead. Okay, I've seen that happen, and I think it's shallow, because it depends on who's doing the SWOT analysis. And you know my views of SWOT analysis already. Okay, second thing, gap analysis. I talked to you about Tenaga, and I talked to you about the need for them to go into a deregulated market. And I talked to you about competency gaps, etc. Their strategic moves for the future are justified on the gap analysis being done for them by Ernst & Young. I have a copy of all of that, which I can't share with you because I've signed a non-disclosure agreement. But all I'm sharing with you is the strategy that they're going to use to move forward is based on lots of different criteria, one of which must be on bridging the gaps, the competency gaps, the capacity gaps, which is converting into change projects. So again, justified. Now, the way that I was taught, is to come up with your bright ideas, Lester, but justify them. And this is a British way. This is my wonderful idea because, and this is my wonderful idea because. Let me share with you a completely different view of this. When I came into Singapore, one of the jobs that we did, maybe 10 years after being there, was for a computer company, a computer distributed company, which had operations all the way south. There's Asia head office in Singapore. And they asked me to come in and help them with a strategy. And they said, look, we need this huge potential for us to grow the business out into South Africa and places like this. And we need a strategist. We need you to help us. Can you come in? And I said, yeah, I'm happy to join you guys, and let's do it. They said, okay, what we've got to do is to produce the strategic plans to send to our main shareholders. And we need to prepare this, for a meeting that's being held in Australia. So I said, okay, now the Australian view and the American view are very similar, but they're very different from the British view. The Australians are quite clear thinkers, they don't need an awful lot of words, but they just need to hear it quite simply and quite clearly. So my advice to you is think very carefully about the business case first. If it was in the UK, maybe it'd be different. So what I said to them is this: how much money are you looking for? How much investment are you looking for? And they said, well, around about 15 to 20 million US dollars for the development of the business. Okay. Now, I'll help you put back the strategy. To get that money, how much do you need and when up front? And when do you need the drawdowns? And I said, probably all of this needs to be drawn down within about 1.5 years. Okay, fine. So we'll put together the strategy. I need you to think very carefully about the return on that investment. When are we going to start to see positive cash flows, net free cash flows against that cost of capital? I need that. And I need to be able to calculate the incremental return on investment, not only during the life of the drawdown, but beyond, for at least 3 years. So I talked to the finance people, they say, yeah, great, we'll do all of that. And we did. Okay, now why am I sharing this with you? Because when we went to Australia to present the business case and the strategy behind it to get that agreed at board level for sign-off, which would normally take 3 months, I reversed my UK thinking and put the financial figures up right up front. The board said to us, you're going to come, we're going to give you 7 minutes. If we think what you have to say is going to be good, we might give you a few more minutes, but we don't want a long-winded story. Please don't take us around the planets. We want it very clear, very simple. What's your proposal and why? How much do we have to invest and when are we going to get a return? Okay, good. But I said to the guys, we have to come very prepared. So we prepared the strategic plan, which is a thick, probably 40-page document, which we take hard copy in suitcases, about 15 copies for the board. I said, all we need to do is to put that on the table to show these guys we've done our homework. We don't even need to open it. All I need from you guys is 5 slides. First slide is an introduction slide. Second slide is the business case, which will include your return on investment. So the slide with return on investment for this project is going to be 22.7% beyond the cost of capital, which we've anticipated internal cost of capital of being 8.5%. So in real terms, we're getting something in excess of 30%. And if the board is interested in hearing our business case, we would like to proceed. And that's the way it worked. 5 slides, in, out, finished, 7 minutes, timed perfectly. And the board said, thank you very much. Would you please go to the outside room and we have to have our internal discussion and we'll call you back. I think we waited 10 minutes and we were called back and the guy said, you know, this is the best presentation we've ever seen. And we believe you've done your homework. We can see you've done your homework because your thinking is so clear. And we would normally, as a board, refer this to a subcommittee for further discussion. But we've agreed to support your project. When do we begin? What's the next step? So this is just live experience I want to share with you about thinking through the criteria for evaluation and putting the justification up front. Now, the project that I've been working on this weekend that I've talked to you about, and I've also had a look at the figures over the lunchtime break, I've advised the people that are preparing the presentation right now for the board meeting on Monday. I've told them exactly the same thing. Reverse the sequence of the slides. The ROI, which is now the end of your 40-slide presentation, the board will fall asleep by then. That last slide goes up front to slide number 2. And if I can produce that return on investment over that during time as a result of digital transformation, I'll have their interest. I'm not going to be there. This is for you. So it's the same thing, guys. So when it comes to real life, when it comes to practicalities, and you want to bring change and intervention in your organization, sell the financial case. Don't waste people's time. Because if it's not worth looking at, then nobody's going to listen to you again in the future anyway. So gap analysis, important. The financial business case is also important. Sell the figures that sell the strategy. Now, let's go back into your assignment. And they're asking you, how are you going to protect your core business? Of course, we're going to have to protect our core business by protecting our existing sales and our net revenue and the incremental sales that we're expecting and the incremental net revenue. So put the figures in. To achieve this, our strategy will be market penetration, market development, and all the other things that we've talked about. So this is the way that I work today, because we've got no time to waste. I don't want to be telling everybody a mother and father story, and at the end of it, people can't afford it or put it into next year's budget. It's often the excuse. We don't have the budget. It has to go into next year's budget. Okay, fine. But at least if we tell you now, we get your interest. So what I'm saying to you, in practical terms, any form of strategy, proposal to a decision-making unit needs to be sold on competency, capacity, clarity, and all the things we've talked about, and criteria for evaluation. So here, we could be looking at gap analysis, we could be looking at financial criteria, we could be looking at pragmatic criteria, we could be looking at stakeholder criteria. But I also am a great believer in what are called consistency criteria, as you can see here on page 199. Now, what does that mean? And this is thinking from a different perspective. You go back to the identity that we put inside the ANSOP matrix. And we go back to the fact that all strategy is based on an anchor. And that anchor is your corporate identity, your brands, or your brand range, or your product range, which has a brand identity attached to it. Okay, now, we know from a strategy point of view, we need to have purpose, vision, mission, or values, and corporate objectives. All of that needs to be there. And that is normally laid down well in advance. And it often moves from year to year. The objectives are just incrementally adjusted. Now, that is what builds consistency to our business. That gives you strategic consistency and a sense of direction. Now, whatever you come up with by way of a proposal could well use consistency criteria to justify the way ahead. By simply saying, look, these changes that we're recommending to protect our core values and our core business is based on our purpose. It's based on our vision and mission as an organization. We don't want to deviate. Now, this is where core values come in. Because the core values guide the behavior of the organization, right? We know that. No, not only that, they guide the thinking. The core values should drive and guide our thinking. Therefore, whatever changes that you're coming up with should be consistent with those core values. Now, I mentioned Coca-Cola to you on Friday evening, and that's an ongoing project, which hopefully we'll get all that done by Wednesday or Thursday of next week. One of the problems that I'm now facing is that, do I go down the consistency route for innovation? Or do I go through another route? Should I look at an inconsistent route to break them all? Now, I've got that dilemma. And I've talked, in confidence to the marketing director, who has told me, I think what we have to do is to be bold and be brave and be creative. I said, thank you very much. So I briefed my people over in London and said, this is the brief. Now go back and rethink. So after I close here tonight with you, 5 o'clock, a conference call into the UK. It was 10 o'clock their time to go through and rethink this based on that brief. Now, why? I want to make sure that whatever we do is not going to be obvious. It's too easy to be obvious that we should be doing data mining, we should be doing digital marketing, we should do that. All of that is obvious. I'm going to have to look at something which is less obvious and is challenge the obvious. Now, is that consistent with their thinking? I don't know. It's a risk. Is it consistent with their core values? Hello? Yes, it is. So there is my answer. By going back to the core values of Coca-Cola, I can now produce an innovation strategy. And that is where I'm going. So as I told you earlier on, I'm living this stuff, as you are living it. You're doing it for your assignment, I'm doing it for a living. So you're doing it for your life, I'm doing it for my livelihood. So all of this stuff, has been written with a lot of experience and a lot of feeling, which I'm still using. So the thinking is this: whatever your proposal that you're going to put together to management, or even on your assignment and with your assignment, needs justification. And you can use some of these ideas for that justification. Without justification, there is no rationale. There is no argument. And at level 7 on an MBA course, argument based on evidence, based on rationale, is what's expected. Otherwise, you just get 40%, 50%, etc. But as I mentioned before lunch, I want the Malaysian papers to look superb. I want you to be getting merits and distinction. I want you to be getting the best marks there are on the planet. We used to achieve it. And Baldev, your head of college, will support me on that, because we're very proud of that. We need to win back that position. So, do take what I'm offering you to heart, because it's given with all sincerity. So that is where you've got to get to. Strategic decisions must be based on solid criteria for evaluation, based on the evidence that you're going to present. All right. Good. I think that's a good point at which we can just take a quick 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we will continue our journey together. So thank you, everybody. See you in 10 minutes. Thank you. Are we all good to kick off again?
Yes, sir. All okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. This is going to be our last session now before we move to the close. Now, I just want to give you some sort of practical advice here. If we're going to be making client proposals or internal clients, that are working for you, my 6 golden rules, we've got to make sure that what we're doing is relevant, is reliable, based on facts and evidence. It's very clear and simple. It's going to make a difference. It is sufficient to get the job done, and it's practical at the end of the day. So these are simply pragmatic golden rules that I want to share with you. And these are on page 210, 211, actually, in the manual. Now, the last thing that we really have to consider is implementation. Now, this is not part of your assignment because the assignment is already got quite a lot of things to do. But from experience, we can do all this hard work, and you can do an awful lot, of work on putting together strategic change, either incremental change or strategic change or transformational change. But it needs to be implemented. And quite a lot of strategy stalls or doesn't work because implementation is poor. Now, this is not part of your assignment. I think we have finished more than enough for the assignment. You could write probably your final project on this now, and there's no reason why you shouldn't. But I do need to close the whole process of strategic management off by thinking about change. And indeed, we could run a whole module or 2 modules just on change management. It's a fascinating subject. It's a very big part of my PhD, where we're looking at managing change across something like 1,500 organizations from Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Nigeria, and the UK. So it's a big part of things that I'm very interested in. But anyway, to be practical about this, what needs to happen after you put together your proposals, and they get signed off and agreed, and you get a mandate from the board or whatever level of the organization that is authorizing this change, is to think about, is the organization appropriately aligned? Now, that's a big question. That means, do we have the right people in the right places to get this job done? And normally, there needs to be realignment going on. Now, we've got different forces at work here. They're the internal drivers for change and the external macro environment of disruption, disturbance, competitiveness, etc. So this is not easy to do. And very often, what I found is that we don't have the right people in place. So one of the reasons that the strategy doesn't work very well is that we don't have the skill set and the competence set to get it done. Or we hire in the wrong people that disturb other people so they become less productive because the organization culture is impacted. Can you begin to see this is just so messy? So this is where the human capital agenda is terribly important, but it doesn't live in the HR department. It lives in the business unit heads. It's their responsibility. The project managers are the people that are responsible for making sure we get the right people in place with the right competency, the right attitude, rather than playing politics, to get things done. Now, I think, and I've mentioned this since Friday, the organization culture has got a huge part to play. If the organization culture is positive, is can-do, is high energy, Microsoft, HP, places like that, Google, anything goes because it's all fun to be there. But that can only happen because they're making tons of money. When organizations are facing challenges and difficulties, then you tend to find this is where the organization itself starts to fall apart because people leave, people get demotivated, people get scared, they don't know what the future is. So the alignment becomes misaligned simply because the culture is moving. So this is a big, big area and something I'm very, very interested in. You know, we were asked by Bank Momalat actually to put in a change management program. Must be about 5 or 6 years ago. And I designed the program, but I decided that I'm not the best person and my team is not the best person to do it. You know, because the culture of the bank and the culture of our people and where we're coming from, I don't think we're going to be able to achieve the impact. And I end up recommending other people, you know, to do it. And they did start, and I think they stalled. And I think it's to do with culture. You know, there's a difference between wanting to do this and having to do it. In that case, the board was saying, look, we need to change. We need to improve our positioning in the Islamic banking industry in Malaysia. We need to become number 3 or number 2. We need to get better. And the shareholders were saying, look, we need more performance. So it's a mandated change. Now, guys at senior management level are saying, what's wrong? Yeah, it's okay. So now there's a tension between the board and top management, and this is not a climate to bring about meaningful transformational change. Everyone has got to be on the same page. So alignment is a big agenda. And this is something you mentioned in your assignment. Yeah, these are our proposals. This is what we want to do to protect our core business. But, and it can be justified in the way that I just explained, but the organization must be aligned to achieve it. First agenda, big agenda. And this is where huge amount of problems. I've seen it time and time again. Big boss wants it. The board wants it because the big boss wants it. It gets down to top management level and it starts to lose energy. Gets down to middle management level. What happened? So this is a big part of the change management to get everyone on the same page. What I've learned from experience, frankly, and just to share with you, you have to create a crisis. You have to create a sense of urgency. Now, we're lucky because we have the pandemic. It's urgent. We need to move. If there was no pandemic, there was no meaningful disruption, organizations would still be stagnant and still be sluggish. Okay, second thing is momentum. Now, some cultures, some countries, some national cultures are more highly energized, than others. When we had our office in Hong Kong for 7 years, Hong Kong never sleeps, It's can do. It all works very, very, very quickly. And the momentum, you feel the pace. It's like going into New York. You go into New York, you go into the center of town, you feel the energy. Like London, you go into Piccadilly Circus, you feel the energy. New York, the same. New York business momentum is fast, and it starts very early. The Americans love breakfast meetings, start at 8 o'clock in the morning or even earlier. But they'll finish early as well, but it's different, it's driven. And then we have an office, or used to have an office in East Malaysia, one in West Malaysia. You come from Hong Kong into Malaysia, it's so much slower. It's so much happier. There's a sense of soul. There's no sense of soul in Hong Kong. It's all business. You see how different it is? Then you go to Indonesia, and it's even slower. So momentum, I think, is contextual. If I want to get people with fire in their belly to be able to move things, which country should I go to? Where am I going to get the energy that I need? I can go and work in, let's say, in Spain or in Italy. There's a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of emotion, a lot of gesticulation, people very happy. But that doesn't mean momentum. things are quite slow in Italy, faster in Spain, slow in France. And I think it's slow in the UK, frankly, at corporate level, because I've become so used to the Asian way of life and the Asian practice. And also, yeah, somebody, as Daniel said, Tokyo. Now, Tokyo, I love, we're very lucky because we've got two important Japanese clients, big Japanese clients, and working with these people is a joy. But when you go to Tokyo, as you quite rightly say, the pace is unbelievable. And the sense of discipline that is there helps the pace because it's a very organized society. You go onto the trains, people will queue to get in and get out. It's an unbelievable experience. And it's not just in Tokyo, it's in Kyoto as well. You get this Japanese sense. But the interesting thing, the momentum is there, but the planning is long term. The internal processes in the organization are slow, based on bureaucracy and based on hierarchy. The culture is different. So what we have to take into account in putting together strategic plans is the need for momentum. Now, you mentioned Tokyo, you mentioned China. China is different. You know, China is very different from Tokyo in terms of momentum. China, I think, probably is faster in the need to push, but we don't think it through. The Japanese think it through. The Chinese will say, let's do this, and then we'll find out how to do it later on, or even change our minds. I've got a project running in Beijing at the moment, and we have a regular catch-up meeting on Wednesdays at the same time. And I find that, you know, what we agreed last week or the week before is now getting changed, and it's becoming a pattern. But dealing with the Japanese, step by step by step by step, I don't have the same problem. So now what we're talking about is culture, cross-cultural management. How do you maintain momentum and organizational alignment to bring about that change is a very interesting challenge. And it's why my PhD was so interesting, you know, by looking at this whole business of change management. Nigeria, Africa is a different thing altogether. Very different. So it's fascinating stuff. You know, the world is a very interesting place. And of course, as I mentioned on Friday, strategy goes together with strengths and structure. And if we don't get that structure right, it will stall. And now, from experience, I've come to realize that unless we set a performance management backbone up for implementation, which is linked into key result areas and KPIs, nothing is going to happen. People will say, yeah, nothing happened. You know, it's like maybe when you're running a business, as I have done for a long time, if I say that this has to happen, I need it to happen now. And in some countries, it will happen yesterday, before now. And in others, it won't happen. So I've learned that I want it to happen by tomorrow lunchtime, by Wednesday, by tonight, put a timeline on. Now, if we're looking at a strategic aspect of that, then I need to put in the performance management system. I've just done this big plan for the hospital, which I explained to you. The way that that's going to work is through the performance management system. We're now setting up new KPIs, new KRAs, to be able to put the hospital into a good light until 2025. And it's exactly the same thing that I mentioned to you in the Japanese oil company I'm working with at the moment. KPIs are now being done for digital transformation. And then people will be able to have something to refer back to. They know what they have to do. They know how they're going to be assessed. And then the change is running through a performance management system. And if that doesn't happen, your change won't happen. And if I reflect back on everything that I've done over many, many years, and I can think about projects that stalled, and they do, is because maybe the performance management system wasn't mature enough. So again, sharing with you, you know, that experience. Now, there's plenty of content in page 220, 222, 224 about all of this, which you can treat as bedtime reading. But it's so very interesting. But what I want to share with you before we part company is to look at some of the theory behind change, which is useful. And and this is in the manual from page 233 onwards, actually. And I'm not going to refer to the manual unless I need to, but I just want to refer to the I want to refer to these major contributors. All right, now let's just talk about models, authors, people that make a meaningful contribution to this idea of change. Now, on the project that is running right at the moment, I got a message on, I think it was Friday afternoon. Can I put together a change management plan for the digital transformation once the project has been signed off by the board? I said, of course. Okay, could you give us a quick template that we can just post up? A very quick one-pager or a thumbnail. So I said, yeah, I can do that, no problem. And I've done that. But I could also give you a much more sort of detailed process about how we go about the change management process, which I think we can do later. Now, what I think has become important is that organization responsiveness to change, the resistance to change, is something that happens through mindset, through fear, through individual self-interest. All sorts of things get in the way. But the way that I like to approach this is say, well, okay, if you're not with us, then, find another way. In other words, you're either with us or leave, because we've got no time for people that don't want to give the commitment. But, in some countries, I can't do that. In China at one time, very difficult to fire people. And even in Thailand, where we used to have an office in Thailand, very difficult to fire people because of labor laws. In Italy, it's almost impossible. I was working for the Arab Sheraton group down in there. We were doing some work for one of the Starwood Group hotels. And I traveled down from Zurich into the hotel, and they've got a huge cultural problem because people are lazy. So I said, okay, pragmatically, we need to replace our frontline staff. They said, we can't do that. Labor laws will not allow it. So we have to redeploy them. We have to be very careful. Okay. Then I got to talk to these people and find out what they need that they don't have. And they were telling me they need more time off. They need more money. They need more recognition. Oh, okay, fine. Let's sit down and give me your 5 main priorities. Now let's see what we can do. But what we need to do is to change the way we're working. Quite tough, And it's not the first time that I've met with this. Even working in Singapore in the early days, I run into these problems. And the reason being is that the staff at middle management and junior management level were thinking that they were hard done by because the boss was not rewarding them fairly. And the boss was living a good life, but they weren't. Unbelievable stuff. So this is not easy. It's messy. So we need something to go back to. So I just want to let you know, the models that I think that could be used. One model that is not in my notes that I'm using now, and it's not in the manual, but you can find it on the internet, is the Beckhard, B-E-C-K-H-A-R-D, Beckhard and Harris model. And this is very good. The way the Beckhard and Harris model works, it starts off, number 1, establish the pain points. Number 2, sell the vision for the future to cover those pain points. Number 3, identify the first steps to be taken. And if you multiply number 1 by number 2, number 3, the energy should be greater than the resistance that you're going to face. Now, this model I used in my PhD, and I'm finding it even today very helpful. Because in some organizations, change is not easy. So the way that I'm dealing with change now, I need to get back down to felt need. I need people to express where the problems are. So I'm just dealing with very simple language. Tell me your pain points. What's up? So the issues and challenges can be converted into pain points. Then we can prioritize them. Okay, so this is what we have to deal with. Okay, now, if the world was perfect, what do you want to see? What did he want to paint that picture with me? Okay, so where is the gap between the pain you're facing and being pain-free? What do we need to do? What are the first steps to be taken? 1, 2, 3. So by facilitating this and working with the people, they find their own solution. And this is working brilliantly for me. I've started to use this model again only this year after finishing my PhD, 20 years ago. So this is a good one. So do have a look at it and understand. Very simple, but it worked brilliantly well. And you can use it even if you've got problems with your children. They're playing up. So what's wrong, Or you're getting underperforming kids at school. So why aren't you getting the A grades? Okay, so what is it you need you haven't got? Do you need a new iPad? Do you need more pocket money? Do you need dad or mum to help with you and sit with? Do you need a tutor? What is it you want? And then I have found by surprise, actually, I want to change my school. Why do you want to change your school? Because I'm being bullied. Okay, fine, good. Now I understand the pain. We can do something about it. So what would you like to do? You want to have a life where there's no bullying. Okay, let's remove you from the school. We put you in somewhere else. Or we deal with the bullies. But that doesn't always work very quickly. So deal with the pain point. Promote the vision of if life was very good. Look at the distance. Then what are the first steps that we, not the plan, not the strategic plan, what are the first steps that we need to take? Because the first steps are the most difficult. And you learn that from Sun Tzu. Taking the first step is the most difficult. You took up your MBA, but to actually get into the first class, that first step was not easy because lots of things are in the way. Like time, like money, like commitment, like can I do this company, all sorts of worries and anxiety get in the way. That's your resistance. But once you've taken that first step and you've been through your first module, you'll realize it's a breeze. And not only that, there's people there to help you. Your classmates, your chums, the college, the local tutors. We are there to get you through. Our success is your success. Now you realize. And that is why everyone works so hard to make sure that you're successful, we're successful together. So that's Beckhardt and Harris. The Lewin model goes back, a lot further than that. It goes back, to the 1920s, the end of 1928, when Lewin first put this together, and then his parents and a lot of his relatives were subject to the Holocaust in the Second World War. And he moved to Chicago University and then ended up working at MIT as a psychologist and an organizational psychologist before he died back in 1947. So he's been and gone, but he got the recognition after he passed away. And he has this 3-step model called unfreezing, change, and refreezing. Now, his belief is that to get people to change, you have to change their mindset. Because they don't want change, they don't like change. They have to think about the benefits of change. So his theory is based on how do we unfreeze people's mindset? How do we create dependency? How do we create insecurity? Which is not very nice, it's very sinister. His belief is you want to change people's mindset, you've got to make them feel uncomfortable. Now, I don't subscribe to that, it's probably not my nature, but this works. I can remember, from the days in which, you were brought up as a child, my grandparents were very Victorian. So if I went to stay with them for the weekend, and let's assume that breakfast came and I was given, I don't know, some eggs and bacon or whatever it may well be, and let's assume I could eat it because I wasn't hungry, I wouldn't be able to leave the table until I'd eaten it. Those were the rules. And if I was going to be stubborn and I still don't want it, they say, okay, you need to go to your room and you can come out. There's no lunch for you. You can come out at dinner time and your eggs and bacon will still be there. Now, that only needs to happen once, because you waste all day. As a child, what are you going to do? So you end up eating what you don't want to eat because you've got to keep your grandparents happy. It's that type of thing. This is what Lewin is about. How do you make people wake up to the need and start to recognize the need? And then once that happens, and there are people I know, even people on my DBA program that we used to run, use this model for their PhD work to find out how can we unfreeze people's mindset? What works? Now, once that unfreezing is going on, you then introduce the change. And then you've got to deal with not only the change, but the changing process, where people have got to accept, adapt, adopt, accelerate, and then start to move forward. And when that happens, we refreeze by institutionalizing the change, setting up new SOPs, new policies, new guidelines, and reinforce them. That's Lewin. Now, companies still use this. Bosses still use this. You probably can even think about your own work environment now or in the past. Well, this is going on, but they didn't know what it's called. Sometimes as soon as people get a job title, like they become a director or a manager, they grow horns. And the way that they manage people is using these type of techniques. So what we have to think about, I think, is that when it comes to a project such as digital transformation, I can use Lewin's framework, but I don't want to be so sinister. So I would call my first day not unfreezing, I'd call it orientation. An orientation for dealing or coping with the current mindset and the current operational practices. And to find out, where the pain points are, what the issues and challenges are that need to be faced. And then asking them, not me, asking them one simple question which I gave you today. What must change? What must we change? And we get the list. Okay, good. So now, because I know from them what must change, in their mind, the vision is already there. They can already anticipate what life is going to be like having changed. All right, good, fantastic. Now, the trick that I use, guys, a bit naughty, I get people to sign off on that first stage. So they never go back and say, oh, it wasn't my idea, I didn't say this, da, da, da. No, I wasn't there. Excuses, I've seen it all. Get them to sign off on what must change. Second stage, I don't use this change and refreezing thing. My second stage is what I call transitioning. Transitioning to enable the change. That's my second stage. Okay? Now, I work together with the organization to get their buy-in, to get their ownership, and get them to agree on how to change. Okay? First question, what must change? Second question, how do we change? Get them to sign off on it. Third stage, which Lewin calls refreezing. I simply talk about making the change. So the question that I need to get answered is when and what do we change? And I want to prevent inertia and reversal back to the way we were. So that gives me commitment, organizational development. I produce a roadmap, set up governance structures to make sure it happens, structures, process, people, technology, KPIs, a board mandate. So that's my 2021 version of Lewin. But the ideas are still there, of course. And I think that that's quite useful. It's very simple and it works. The second model that is useful and has been around for a long time is on page 237 in the manual, and this is Lewin's 7S framework. Now, this is very easy because you say if we want to be able to implement change, we want to get your interventions in place, we need to look at strategy, which we've done already. We need to look at shared values. We need to look at our management style, etc., etc. Now, this was something that was put together back in the 1960s, revisited in 67, revisited again in 83. And, originally, it wasn't even put together by McKinsey, and I don't know how that name actually happened, because other academics put it together, and maybe they stole that name, I'm not sure. But whatever it is, it's been around for a long time. And I used to use it, and I didn't find it very helpful because I didn't know how to use it. Because if you look at the diagram on 237, everything relates to everything else. Shared values relates to structure. How do I untangle that mess? And then two things happen. I supervised somebody's DBA program, doctoral program, based on Sri Lankan Airlines. And that student was probably the weakest student on the DBA program. Very pleasant, very personable, good people skills, but not intellectually the best. And I said to her, okay, let's use a simple framework and see whether we can change that framework and learn from it, because that's going to be, we create complexity out of simplicity and end up with simplicity. So we start with 7S, we probably end up adding a few more and then see how it's going, which is what happened. And she's already finished in DBA. It was an excellent piece of work based on Sri Lankan Airlines. But what we tried to do is to find out how to make the 7S framework actually work. So by taking all of these rings out and taking all the lines out, you could restructure it, reconfigure it, produce interactive matrices, work out the tension between each of these, and it becomes quite useful. But it was never intended that way. Now, let me just share with you one of the things that I've discovered. This model talks about shared values. Yeah, okay, we can all believe in the same thing. But that doesn't mean that we own it. We just believe in it. Is it going to influence our behavior, our thoughts, and our commitment? I'm not sure. So I've created a new term. I call it shared consciousness, not shared values. Because if you're conscious about something, it becomes imperative. It becomes actionable. And that is a very important concept that I use in change management. I want people to have a common consciousness about what needs to change. Those are my pain points, guys. That's where I get the commitment from. But it doesn't come from me. I just facilitate the thought process. And if I've got the shared values, I can get an understanding of what's wrong and the purpose, etc. The strategy will emerge. And then I would then ask the question, so, okay, if we want to be able to do this, what are we going to do to the people, the process, the technology, the physical evidence, the infrastructure? Okay? We could put that and hide that all under structure. And then, do we need any changes about the way we work? Now, what McKinsey meant was management style. I'm not talking about that. I mean, I'm talking about style of working. What needs to change? We need to be more productive. We need to be more digital and less analog, and so on and so forth. So it can work. So to do that, what systems must change? Operating systems, processes, SOPs, policies, governance. Then what competencies do we need? Now I fall into a problem. So what competencies do I need that I don't have, and what competencies do I need? So there becomes an organizational development agenda to enable the change. Now you can see McKinsey is quite good. Now, like all of these models, I never steal them and simply apply them. It doesn't work. What you've got to do is to learn from this structure and produce your own conceptual framework. You see, if, let's assume that you came in to give a presentation and I'm sitting on the board as a non-executive director, and you come in and you present McKinsey's 7S framework for you, I'd simply say at the end of your presentation, thank you so much. And then I'd say to the board members after you've gone, look, this guy's just learned something from his MBA, but it doesn't work. So the trick is to take ideas from these models and combine them. I had a group of about 80 very senior managers that had lost their jobs back in January of this year. And they're all unemployed and redundant and all despondent, etc., all looking for new jobs. So it was a contract that we got from the government. I'm very happy to have it. And I need to work with these guys over a few weeks to give them new tools to go back into employment with. And one of those tools was how we're going to manage transformational change. So I introduced these to these models and a few others. And I got them to design their own model, something they can take away that they can own. And the reason that I do that, we did that on our DBA program, I like to present our own conceptual space, because I don't need to borrow templates. We want to be able to create our own. So they're good ideas that come from Lewin. They're good ideas that come from McKinsey. And then there are ideas that I don't think are very helpful. You see, the work of Kantner is very, very academic. He talks about the need to take bold strokes and long marches. Now, what sense is that going to make in Kuala Lumpur? So that's the reason I put that up there, not because I think it's of any use. I don't think it's helpful. But there is another academic called Kotter, Kotter, which you can look up. And Kotter's approach is 10 steps. And he takes a 10-step process whereby we need to establish the need. We need to build the energy. We need to get an understanding of what needs to change and why. We need to get the commitment. And eventually you go through a lot of these processes. So Kotter's work, if you're doing some extra reading, because people ask me about reading, Kotter's work is quite good. Now, what Lewin says is that behind this dynamic is resistance, because people will resist change. They just don't like it at the end of the day. But it happens, and we have to respond. So he has done something which you can read about called force field analysis. It's also in the back of the manual, whereby he tries to help us to understand something he calls equilibrium. What he's asking us to understand is, how is the organization working now? What's keeping it happy? What's keeping it in balance? What's keeping everyone a happy bunny? Let's understand that. Now let's think about the impact of change, strategic change, on that status. It's going to create disequilibrium. And where is that disequilibrium going to be created? Among which stakeholders, among which employees, at which level, and so on. And how base do they have? And then we can create an understanding of what is called the force field, forcing us back to where we were and not allowing us to move forward. So he has put together this feeling, or this theory on force field analysis, which a lot of people don't understand because it's not explained very well. So where we're coming from now, during the unfreezing stage, there are going to be a lot of people that don't want it to happen. This is where you're going to face the resistance. So this is where I find, practically, in getting away from all this academic stuff, we need to get political sponsorship. See, in the hospital job that I've just finished, and I've been on the board of that hospital for 14 years or thereabouts, I work very closely with the chairman. And the chairman is the ultimate boss. and the biggest shareholder. So nobody will disagree with him. So if I can get him to agree to whatever we need to do, and the trust is there, it's been implicit for many years, I've got no problems. Because nobody dare challenge him, because they know he's quite fierce. And if they don't give him their support and their face, he will cut their tail pretty quickly. So I find that there's a need to get political sponsorship. Now, in some organizations, it's important to get that at middle management level. Now, let me just share another insight with you. On working on change management projects, I have found that it's normal to start at the top, but that's not helpful. I like to start at middle management level because that is where the knowledge resides. The knowledge at middle management level is more powerful than the knowledge at top management level, because where the knowledge resides is where the decisions are taken, and that's where the real control is. So if we recognize that, the middle management are there to support the top management, who are there to make decisions. They're not involved in operations. But I need to work with those middle management people because they are the people that are going to be responsible for implementing the changes that you have proposed to protect the core business, right? Because the big bosses will say, yeah, go ahead, fine. Okay, then nothing happens. Why? Because it's not cascaded down, it's not translated down to middle management level. So that is an important insight I want to share with you. You want to make things happen, work at middle management level. It was a big piece of advice given to me by my last boss. He said, Lester, if you want to be successful in this and in your consultancy, always recognize that the smaller people in the organization are probably the most important. So give them face, give them time. They will be there for you. And he's absolutely right. He said, do you notice when I come in, I'm always the first into the office. I know we start at 9 o'clock, but I'm always in by 7:30, and I know you come in by 8. He said, but during those first 30 minutes, I talk to the staff, the cleaners, the receptionists, the car parking attendants, the contractors that are coming in to do, physical work. I need to I need to be visible, but I need to know that those people that support our business at that level need to know the big boss cares. Then they will give you the face and they'll tell you all sorts of stories that you need to hear because other people won't tell you, because they want to protect you. Never forget that. And I never do forget that. And it was a good piece of advice. So I find that, even with current projects that are running, and some of which have been held up because of MCO, I'm working now with one procurement department where I'm dealing at junior to middle management level to deal with the operational problems of people working analog when they need to work digitally. But having got their buy-in, the trust is there because they know they have a solution. And I am like the solution for them. And I'm introducing now the IT people to help and work with them and setting up the hotlines and all the rest of it. So they know that there's a safety net there. So they will the trust is there. And I think that this is something I just want to share with you in strategy work and strategic management. One of the reasons it doesn't work very well, is that the organization trust level is not high enough. So can you begin to see, this is a huge agenda. We could talk for months about it. Now, finally, what I'd like to do to close, things that you don't have any questions, is to answer the question again about reading. So this was a question that came up, I think, from Daniel or somebody earlier on, and I've already addressed it, but I just want you to make sure that I'm covering it professionally with you. Should you wish to go into any reading, Johnson & Scholes have been producing books on corporate strategy for donkey's years. And it's just like when I started writing marketing books. My first marketing book with Professor Lancaster was in 1989. It's still on the shelf, and we update it every 2 years. It's the same for Johnson & Scholes. I think now the latest edition is probably the 12th edition. But, as I mentioned earlier on, it's a weapon. It's not a book. It's very thick and full of a lot of cases, and some interesting stuff in there. But you're not going to learn any more than what there is in the manual. In fact, a lot less. Burns, I've just shown you Burns' book. The latest version was 2012, 2013. It's very good on managing change, very interesting, very easy to read. The Blue Ocean Strategy, Osborne, Kim, etc. Should you wish to read it, I wouldn't. If you don't have much time, I wouldn't bother. Mintzberg and Quinn, there are so many versions of Mintzberg. All I would say is that Mintzberg has written a lot. He's written something called the Strategy Safari, which is being used in Petronas at the moment. I can tell you because I've got the head of transformation, on a short course the other day, and she said that they're using Strategy Safari, which is quite interesting. And basically, it means that you've got to walk around and find out from different people in the organization their ideas to put a strategy together, which is okay. And Mintzberg also wrote what more recently called the Rise and Fall of Corporate Strategy, where all he put together earlier, he then contradicts himself. So I didn't like that. So these are good people to look at. Mintzberg, Quinn, Burns, Johnson and Scholes. I think that's enough. Now, on journals, of course, the easiest way of dealing with this, you'll find loads and loads of stuff in the Harvard Business Review. All you need to do is to go into Harvard Business Review website, key in a title, and then go in as a student member or register yourself as a student member. You can register through the college or register through the university that you're doing your degree with, and then you can get access to their journal articles. You could also go into Google Scholar, and of course, I think the university will give you access as well. So the last piece of advice, I think, having written the assignment up, and you've got the boat structure together, clear it with Dr. Loger and say, is this okay? And she'll say yes or no. It's a very quick answer. And then you need to build it up, and after it's built up and you've written it, go through a second time with citation to make sure that every paragraph, has got some reference to a model, an author, some form of academic leadership, some important and significant work, and you're done. So I think that's probably the point at which we can close our journey together. It doesn't seem very long since Friday, but we've covered a tremendous amount of content. There's a question here, do I suggest the maximum number of references? I think the answer to that is up to you. I don't. I think you've got to be looking at something a minimum of about 10 or 15. Maximum, probably maybe add another 10 to that. But here is the trick. When you put your assignment in, at the back of your assignment, you'll have a heading that says references and another heading that says bibliography. The heading references are your direct in-text references that you've made. The bibliography are the things that you've referred to, that you've not used, but you've had a look at. So, for example, you just look at this slide, and let's assume you don't use any of it. You could simply scan this and put it in as bibliography because you're aware of it and it looks good. So, when it comes to MBA assignments, packaging is important. Presentation is important. You've got to write a report, not an essay. Make sure it's a report. Make sure that it's backed up. Make sure that the back end of the report has got your references, your bibliography, at part 1 and part 2 for both the slides and the report. So it's dressed up nicely. The external examiner will have a look at that, and the way that I work, just to share with you, and I shouldn't really share this with you, but I am, because I really want Malaysia to do well, I always look at the back first. Let's have a look at this assignment. Let's look at the back. How many references are there? Are they up to date? Are they relevant? Are there good names in there? Let's have a look at the bibliography. Has this person done their reading? Have they done their homework? Now, I don't know whether you have or not, but it looks like you have. So this packaging. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. Any more final questions? Okay, well, I wish you all the very best. You're in very good hands. I hope that this has been an inspiration to you about the importance of strategic management. From my mind, this is the most important subject on your MBA because all the other stuff you're doing is all in functional areas. It's about marketing or finance or operations management, etc. This is looking at the organization as a whole. It is a thing that brings everything together. So I bid you good night and farewell. Be successful. Use some of these ideas, and when I bump into you at the airport, say hello. You can say, well, I remember seeing you on a Zoom call. So take care, everybody. All the very best. Thank you, and good. All the very best to you, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye for now. Good luck.
Thanks, Prof.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Love you too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a great evening.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.